it's out there. Addressing the state police, we can provide them with protocol. You know, if they can afford a $64,000 mass spectrometer every 3 years, they can afford spending another $10,000 on an HPLC every 10 years too.
Well, they don't want
okay?
It doesn't find any THC.
Well, it does. They can find THC in both machines, but
they're not
one will actually show them how to weigh it.
Not gonna happen.
And the amount of work that they take to calibrate their scales and to ensure that they're all within so that they can weigh the sample as 100 grams and say it's 100 grams of THC,
Right.
it would take an extra step of calibrations on their machine, and their machine would do that extra step of measuring how much is in the product. They just don't want to.
Right. Well, yeah, I understand that, and they're not going to. They're not going to. I'm talking about the state police on the side of the road being able to enforce. A guy look in your trunk and be able to tell whether you're within your numbers. You know what I mean? Real quickly,
if there's a proper label,
be able to
they shouldn't
examine
have
the
to
labels that
examine
you guys
your
provide.
meds at all.
Well, I mean, and that's still just a cop-out.
Would you guys be interested
Forget
in
the part
helping us draft a potential amendment that we're gonna, you know, we're in a position here, we've been asked to talk to them about a potential answer to those couple of things right there, you know, and we'd love to have you guys involved in that process to help us come up with common sense measures that they can, I mean, if we get the edible thing passed, it's gotta increase your guys' business 2-3 fold.
Well,
I don't see
aside from the matter, yeah, I mean, it's
and it's a good thing for the patients as well.
It's important that that the patients aren't getting, you know, sent up the river with 100 grams of THC because they have one brownie.
One bite, yeah.
And you know, it's appalling to see the way that it's treated by the State Police Crime Lab, and the fact that they emphasize positive over negative results. If they don't find something, there's no paperwork.
We've worked in several court cases, you know, with the state police, so we're quite familiar.
Yeah. Well, listen, you know, there's a question that we've been, you know, as board members of the Cannabis Stakeholders Group have been thinking about. You know, if this bill was, you know, pass or fail today, you know, as a potential safety compliance center, would you be happy with it?
The way the bill is right now?
Today.
Yeah, I mean, we could work with it.
We can work within the guidelines of the
I mean, we can work within the guidelines of anything. We're a nimble organization, so.
As I said, 660, a lot of those regulations got piggybacked on, but there's not as much in terms of, like, you know, irradiating the entire crop and all these other little things that they require in Canada.
Well, 660 only addresses plant material. They don't.
Yeah.
You can only get plant material in Canada.
But in terms of testing on the plant material, like all those regulations, they're not that strict to an industry standard, or, you know, of chemical testing. So if need be, we could adhere to them. Now, would that, like, eliminate 50% of the medicinal strains in the state? Maybe, you know, like 50% might not pass that rigorous of a test, but the other 50% would, I assume. Now, if they were more strict, applying like EPA, nothing would pass, kind of a thing, you know, would have to have 0 cultures over the course of this and blah, 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 blah. So, could we handle as it sits right now? Yes. Is it ideal? Maybe not. I mean, there's some issues that need to be addressed. It'll maybe raise a little bit of the testing costs for us, but to be able to provide those services, it's not, you know, a problem. We can't do it. You know, it's just a changing landscape, and in this industry, the landscape's always changing. So it's something you either got to be able to roll with the punches, or this isn't the industry for you.
Okay, for some of our more recent people that have just showed up, we've got Rob and Joe from Iron Labs, you know, from Central Safety Compliance Center after these bills pass. So what questions do you have for these folks in regards to testing and you know, what we, you know, if these bills, you know, are going to pass, you know, with the impression that we got from Richard Bill's office, testing and labeling is going to be a big issue. What do you want to see in there in regards to testing and labeling?
So my question is, how long does the testing process take?
Right now, we have a 48-hour, 2 business day turnaround time. That's for potency, visual inspection, and then the, you know, issuing of the results. If the laws, as they sit now, are passed, perceivably that time would maybe double. But that's still within a decent window of opportunity. If you're having your entire batch certified, it takes you a week before the product's ready. You know what I mean? And that's just in a period of curing time. You know, you get your dry product, you have it tested while it's curing. You know, and I mean, it's not going to be a downtime.
So what you're suggesting is every farmer has their own membership and test it their self after their own curing process? Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm suggesting that at the highest level of, or you know, I mean, the highest level, the person who's producing it potentially can test the entire batch and get a, you know, it's cheaper for him to test the entire batch than it is for every dispensary to test the 1 or 2 ounces of that batch that they get. Because I've seen people drop off samples at every dispensary in Ann Arbor, and then all the samples come to us and we test them 5 of the same sample.
So the
And-
farmers
And it
themselves
takes
would
longer
have
for
to.
the dispensary to get it on
Yeah.
the shelves too.
Yeah, so,
it's
so
very
most,
certified.
you know, a lot of growers will, instead of going through a dispensary, will become members themselves or clients themselves, which is,
In the bill, the provision center's responsible for.
What's the batch
testing,
size?
not the farmer.
I'm not
Correct.
finished yet, I'm so sorry.
oh,
The provisioning center would be responsible under the new bill.
The
For the
provisioning
test-
center.
For the testing,
Do
not
you,
the farmer.
do you realize how much medicine it may take for a provisioning center to have medicine for a whole week while, just for a whole week, let's start there. How much medicine might you think one might go through in a grand?
I'm not affiliated with any of the testing centers, so I don't actually know how much crosses their counters on
Okay,
a daily
imagine a
basis.
number.
But let's say, you know, a pound or 2 a day.
Okay, times 7,
In a big place,
times 7.
times 7. 7
That,
pounds
that's
a day.
1 week.
Yeah.
Now, that's the medicine that I have in your testing facility.
I know people who can get a pound off of a plant. And if they got 12 plants that are all the same, they need to just sample all of those 12 plants, and there's 12 pounds. You know, so I mean, there's a way it works.
Batch size would be 1 pound that is supposed to be tested.
I don't know.
They don't have-
There's no legislation
There's
on
no
that.
how
limit
much.
on that, it just says it needs to be tested, it doesn't say the whole batch, doesn't say every plant of that strain, that's another issue.
See, and that's where there's inconsistencies in this, because
Right.
a lot of people who have done this have lived in the gray for a while. So if you're telling me that I have to get test results, why wouldn't I just go get test results on this one thing, and then take it and act as if these are
That's-
test results for
Well,
the rest of it?
let me answer that question. It becomes, you know, when you own a restaurant, there's safety guidelines. People break those rules all the time. You know, if the health department comes in and sees you breaking the rules, they're gonna tell you to start following the rules or else you're going to get into trouble.
Correct.
Then you also have, you know, the market that's going to self-enforce these kind of things. So if, you know, you're using a year-old test on a plant from a different caregiver to,
well, that can happen by.
No, I would assume that somebody would do it with their same strain, but in a recent amount of time and take the best results to be able to shop to get what they want.
but
I mean, that's what's
my
gonna-
point is the market weeds that out naturally to a certain extent, and there's always gonna be fudge factors for.
Yeah, and that's what if it's
Yeah,
gonna
the
be
chain of
fair,
custody is
I'm
always
just
gonna be a problem, are you getting what you're getting, so,
like- Yeah, no, and I do get it.
I
It's just-
understand that.
That's the integrity of a business owner, the way I look at it, the people that do it the right way.
We issue results with a time frame too, so they're not using a result that's a year old. It's not valid.
No, I would say within like, from one
It's
batch
30
to the
days
next, like
usually,
2
30
months
days
later.
to 60 days depending
I
on
mean,
the
that's
product.
what it goes with. I mean, it
you
just
know-
seems like that's what people actually do.
I'm definitely not finished.
Alright, so
He's not finished.
go ahead, what's your?
If you would like to come along with me just for one moment, please.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about theoretical maybes, ifs, and possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about actual gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
If you have 2 pounds of medicine for 7 days, that is 14 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
If it takes you 7 days to bring my medicine test back to me, that would mean that I need to have my 7 days worth of medicine that I'm working with is 14 pounds. The 7 days worth of medicine that you have in your testing lab hold back, that's 14 pounds. The next week of medicine, as soon as you deliver me that piece of paper, I need to hand you another sample because I need another
Sure.
7 days
Mhm.
with another 7 on that.
Okay.
That's 4 times
So,
14.
I don't need the numbers, the math,
No,
math's fine.
those are your numbers that you had said.
Yeah, it's fine. What,
So 14 times.
what are you trying to get at though? What's the
14
question?
times 4, can you bring that test time down?
No,
Because 14
there's
times
a,
4
there's
is
a set
incredible
time on
amount
the
of
test.
medicine to hold.
Okay, just
And the
excuse me
safety
for one moment.
for the person that has to store that medicine is dangerous. So the quickness for you to come up
I
with a
understand
fast
that,
test
but
is
we
very
can't,
important.
we can't do a 5-day test in 2 days. So when the test required is 5 days, it's gonna take 5 days.
You may need
Now,
multiple
if you
surgeries.
need to hold on to the medicine for 5 days before you can dispense it, then so be it. Once you get into the system of that, you won't be holding on to medicine for 7 days because the 7 days ago, you gave medicine that you'll be getting and you're able to distribute. So after 1 week, this isn't an issue.
Let me ask you.
Now, holding on to the large numbers is an issue, but that should be addressed in, something that clarifies these ambiguities.
I think that's actually where your concern needs to go, would be an element of the bill where a provisioning center is protected, that they can hold more.
Yep, it's all about how much you can take in anyway, which
Well,
is
you're
limited,
unlimited now.
so,
You're unlimited by the amount you can take in right now.
Right now.
In this new bill,
Right.
you're unlimited as a provisioning center agent to take in unlimited amounts.
So then,
Unless your local municipality puts in
Well,
rules that says.
here's a
Where's
concern that
storage?
it is
Where's
a
storage in that
liability.
bill?
It is, but I
If
mean,
I
that would
am
scare the hell out of
able
legislators, I would
to take
downplay that,
in
because that
as
would.
much
that would-
medicine as I physically possibly can, that only means that the one person is able to do all the taking in and inventory for that day. Does that mean that that person is able to put that on his back, in his backpack, and walk off with that? Everything he
No,
can
you
take
can
in
only
for the day.
transfer
be in your
15
building.
ounces. You can
It'll
only
be in
transfer
your
15 ounces.
you can have.
Yeah, only in the
30 pounds.
provisioning center, and that's controlled by the one person. That doesn't mean that person has to be present at every moment, every transfer.
and they can only have one
But if
location.
something goes down and there's a problem, that will be the person that's contacted and dealt with as the owner, and is
Understood.
responsible for those amounts.
Let me ask you this, Joe. There's this question about
We couldn't have like the storage
culturing
warehouse.
versus microscopic biological analysis. We've seen some language, from CPU about culturing. And, we know your methodology is a combination of both. The impression I got is that, depending on how our language proposals go, the difference in turnaround time could be the difference between
Yeah.
5 days and 2
Yeah.
days.
Sure.
Right.
So,
Right.
if they accept a microscopic analysis as being thorough, and as I've said, the microscopic analysis 50% of the time is better than the culture. We catch like the samples that pass, when cultured, don't produce any colony forming units or above the limit.
Right.
Now, if it fails our test, it could be anywhere from like 2 culture forming units to 200 culture forming units. And 100 is kind of like the standard, whereas some states have a lower, like 50, I think, or something like that. 100 is okay, that's kind of okay in food products and so on. So for us, our own, validating of our visual inspection, we've seen that the visual inspection can do, but is that going to be okay, with the legislators? Is that going to be okay if they adopt, all the things from 660 or where those came from, which is
So,
EPA?
one thing that I heard talked about a little bit is like, like if you're doing a microscopic analysis and you've given it the thumbs up, and we put a sticker on it, it's safe. It's been approved by the Safety Compliance Center, and we get that turnaround done in 2 days. But let's say you see some abnormalities, and you call the provider of that sample and say, hey, we see a little bit of potential mold in there. It might be within the guidelines. Do you want us to spend the 3 days to culture it so that we can give you the green light to use that
That's
medicine?
currently what we do.
Right, which is the current thing. Do you think that would be acceptable moving forward and keep people safe and keep our costs down and be able to
The issue is,
not have to
yes,
throw things away?
it is good, but it has to fit under, you know, how is the Safety Compliance Center accredited, and how do you verify that information? Because it is a very subjective analysis, and there aren't numbers. Enumerating the colonies, the number of colonies that can be formed, that gives hard numbers, and it's much easier to put a limit and say, yes, this passes or fails.
Yeah,
And-
but the biologics, you know, have so many varying factors. You know, your controls are, you know, it's gonna be difficult when forming colonies to have, you know, 100% precise breeding
It's
quotas
actually,
on.
it's really not. We use like standardized Petri films, so we don't have to pour our own agar plates. And it's a validated industry standard. It's used in like every food service to measure the total yeast and molds in food products. And any USDA or FDA approved facility utilizes Petri films for the culturing of things. And so they have a really high pass rate. They've been validated, and they even have machines that can count the number of colonies on the cards so it's consistent and it's not user error from a person. So like along those lines, these are very rigorous and rugged tests utilized in many food service and pharmaceutical industries already. So the way I look at it is they're going to want to just jump on the heels of somebody else and just adopt, you know, USDA or FDA protocol when given the opportunity. The way the law is written, or the legislation is written, it's very ambiguous, because once you define something in law, it's extremely difficult to change it. It's there, it's written in stone, you can't change it, you need to have like a 2/3 vote to get rid of it. But if you leave it ambiguous, then you can come back with another new bill and define just that ambiguity, and then you can shape it a little bit better. But if we get too strict and put it down in stone with this one, there'll be no going back. So, in addressing how it is slightly ambiguous as to how this was going to do this or who can hold this much, it's better to keep it that way and then address those problems with additional bills once this one passes, rather than trying to make this perfect, because it's never going to be perfect and get passed.
So you
But
think,
leave it ambiguous, and then you can make it perfect down the road.
so if we can, you know, give them the standards that they're looking for, but, you know, leave it ambiguous from the concept of being able to do
Putting
microscopic
numbers in,
analysis,
yeah.
you know, in conjunction with, you know, these liberal standards that we're working on for the culturing, then, you know, that you're thinking that that's our best bet?
Yeah, and so working with language on that, the key is saying, you know, a passing criteria established by the provisionary, or by the Safety Compliance Center, so that then as that industry shapes and takes form, it'll take form on its own merit rather than what this law is forcing it to do. You know, like, oh, we have to charge $3,000 a test now because that's how much the state says this test costs.
Are you working with any other testing facilities to, you know, stay in conjunction with what's going on in other states?
We're not able to do that.
Okay.
There's a lot of like copyright issues with some of the other states with their business plans as well as ours. There's also the issue that each state is operating under different regulatory guidelines already, or none whatsoever. So we all have different models for how to operate. In terms of what is the industry standard for the testing, we're taking and we're all kind of shaping the industry, all the labs together. We are working with one of our suppliers who supplies our chemical standards as well as our columns and a lot of our chromatography consumables, who's taken it on themselves to work with all the cannabis labs. So they're working as a supplier, and they work hand in hand with the labs in order to help, you know, forge the path, you know, blaze the path in this industry. Yeah,
Well,
rest-
some, yeah, but it's coming together with, you know, with the other third parties, so.
Yeah, and so we stay connected through the third party kind of a thing. We don't work directly with any other lab because there's licensing issues and stuff.
Proprietary based, yeah. It's
It's
hard
our
to get
idea
people to come
too,
together
so.
and all wanna work together sometimes in any particular
Well,
industry.
and like you said, this is a gray area industry. You know, everyone is so used to working in the black market or underground and not being open about or their you know, who they're working with, and so it's really hard to get people to open up. But we are seeing that, and then there's this big initiative where, like, California has a lot of testing labs, so they're starting, you know, groups that kind of function as associations of cannabis laboratories and blah, 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 blah. And I see that going national at this point, and we're all gonna get into a point where we do have this discussion, but you will see each business in each relative state is gonna take shape based on that state's legislation.
Corey, did that answer your questions to a certain extent? All right, now you guys, most of us here are participating in the